Hello Internet, my name is the Golden Stalfos, and today we're going to be talking about Metroid 3, Super Metroid, for the Super Nintendo, because that was their naming scheme back in the day. Every game that came out on the Super Nintendo was the Super version of the NES game. um, kind of wish they still did stuff like that, honestly. It's fun, you know? It's fun. Mario Switch, instead of coming up with a weird subtitle. Just make it Mario Switch. Who cares? You know? Anyway, so Super Metroid is a weird one to talk about because there's not much to say. Like, it does show its age at times, but it's for the Super Nintendo, so it's got a lot more like modern design elements that than the first two games, and it really doesn't show its age in a way that like hurts the overall experience the way those do. Um, and it's kind of like in the same situation as Zelda. Like Zelda 1 and 2 are both good in their own way, but they're also very experimental and very like old, you know? And it's hard to go back and play them again because they're so old. But replaying A Link to the Past doesn't feel, it doesn't feel like the game was made 30 years ago and is just, coming apart at the seams with age. And that's kind of the same thing with Super Metroid. There are places where you can tell that, yeah, this is an older game, but it ultimately really just doesn't make a difference in the quality of your experience for the most part. I do have some problems with Super Metroid, though, and I don't think it's the untouched masterpiece that a lot of people say it is. So what are my problems with it? Well, one, I don't like that they took a bunch of enemies or bosses from the original Metroid and just ported them right over to this one. Now, I can understand, taking one boss, usually the final boss, and making it like the series' recurring villain. Mario did that, Zelda did that, it's fine if you want to do that. It's not the greatest idea, but it's fine. And then Metroid eventually settled on having Ridley as a recurring enemy that would show up, throughout various titles. But in Super Metroid, they hadn't quite come to that decision yet, so they ended up stealing Ridley and Kraid and Mother Brain. Like, the first game only had, basically just those three, if you're, but it does add two new ones, right? There's Fantoon and whatever the fuck that other guy's name was. But and there's some mini bosses. There's like that plant monster thing and the Chozo statue showdown and some shit. There's some shit in there. It's worth playing, but I just feel like it was unnecessary to repeat those bosses. Now, to the game's credit, they don't have the same exact pattern or method of fighting them, but they are repeated, and it is annoying that they're repeated. So, yeah, I don't know. Take that for whatever you take it for. I don't know. The game also has a bit of a problem with player direction. Again, that's not really like a huge deal, and most of the games in this series are better off when they have less player direction, because Nintendo doesn't understand that it's possible to have player direction without being hand-holdy as fuck. See Fee for examples of that. But it would be nice to have slightly more explanation on what your weapons do and which buttons activate them. you know? I mean, like, when you get a weapon, there's this big pop-up window, but it doesn't give you quite as much information as I would like it to give. Um, you know, and, like, if you're gonna break the immersion to put up a big, you know, here is your power-up thing, then at least give us all the details on it instead of, you know, like if you want to be minimalist and not break the immersion, I get that. But you put up the huge ass pop up and pause the game for us. So like clearly, you know, clearly that's intentional. I don't know. It's whatever. Um, so that, I mean, again, that's a really small issue, and it only applies to certain things, but yeah. Um, well, and like, you know, the wall jump, like there's no point in the game that tells you how to do it, and it's a little bit too precise to do it by accident. And then like at the very end, right, at like really close to the end, you see this animal jump back and forth on the walls, and you're like, damn, I wish I could do that. And you can, but you don't know that because you never got a power up for it, and the game never told you, hey, this is part of your moveset. And again, it's a bit too specific to find out by accident, you know? Like, there's some pretty tight timing on the button pressing, and, you know, you need to have a vertical shaft to use it on. So, yeah, I don't know. I feel like it could have been integrated a little better and taken advantage of more, but whatever. Um, this game is really the only one in the series that truly takes advantage of sequence breaks, especially with the bomb jumping, which is nice. I really like that. Um, you know, there are some places where you can just like really get out of bounds. Well, not out of the map, but like out of where you're supposed to be at that point in the story. And that's really fun and interesting, and I wish other games in the franchise had done that more. You know, AM2R does that a bit, but that's a fan game, so it doesn't technically count. Yeah, yeah. I suppose you can look at Metroid 1 and say that it has, you know, this open layout where you can, you know, go in whichever direction and backtrack however you want, and, you know, theoretically there's sequence breaks to be had there. But it's also such a fucking slog to get through, and the remake takes all of that out in favor of a streamlined, you know, go here, go here, go here approach. So, you know, Um, yeah, yeah. And like I said before, basically all of the games in the franchise that are worth playing are linear. All of the Prime games are very linear. All of, you know, Fusion and Other M and, you know, and Samus Returns, like all of them are super linear, you know? Which is fine because they make it, you know, they make a compelling game anyway. Linear doesn't equal bad, but, you know, if you want free form exploration and back and forth and shit, then you might actually have to look outside the Metroid series, even though that's kind of what it's known for. Because Super Metroid is the only one that really has a bunch of sequence breaks. There's a couple that you can pull off in the original unpatched version of Metroid Prime 1, if you really try. And Prime 2 has a lot of backtracking exploration available in the late game, but there aren't really any sequence breaks. And that's about it. you know? Um, yeah. I mean, in Prime 3, they decided to just separate the sections of the game through the spaceship menu so that there's literally no way you can, you know, use geometry to get from the lava level to the forest level and just, you know, bust up. Because those levels are on different planets or different sections of the planet, but whatever. Um, you know, and so that's whatever, I guess. Like, I don't really care. Um, Super Metroid also introduces a bunch of upgrades. Not as many as you think. A lot of them were introduced in Metroid 2, but there are a bunch that were first introduced here, and the way that they stack on top of each other was pretty cool. Although I think that's more of a system limitation. Like, um, like in Prime, you get to switch between weapons so that you can use them for the correct situation and stuff. And like, I feel like if they could have done that in Super Metroid, they probably would have, um, because that is a better system overall for like, making sure that the gameplay is varied and unique. And the only reason they took that switching mechanic out of Prime 3 is because it would be really awkward to implement it on a Wiimote. Like it works fine on a GameCube controller because you have that D-pad and that C-stick, and you can use those to toggle. But on the Wiimote, you don't have an extra stick, and your button placement is all wonked. So, it just doesn't happen. I think if the Wiimote really wanted to appeal to, you know, more pro style games, then they could have put buttons in a couple other places. There are spots where your hand wraps around the Wiimote and you can, use your fingers to tap on the sides. And in theory, you could have put some buttons there. Same thing on the nunchuck, actually. Like, there could have been some buttons on the inner side where your hand is going to wrap around, but there weren't. And so it doesn't work like that. I mean, to be fair, the Wiimote does have a lot more inputs available than any other controller previously because of the motion inputs, but a lot of games either didn't use the motion inputs or used them for one specific thing. Like in Prime 3, you use it to aim, so you can't really use it for anything else besides aiming. And that's why they didn't really have visors and weapon swapping in Prime 3, but I'll talk about that when I get to Prime 3. So, Super Metroid had this stacking system, which Prime 3 later adopted because they couldn't do the switching thing. And it was cool. It was kind of fun to just, have the plasma wave ice beam going whoosh, like just tear through mofos. It was cool. They introduced super missiles as an addition to your regular missiles, which is awesome and powerful, and I like it. Um, you know, they introduced a lot of cool stuff, and between the sequence breaks and the new enemies and bosses and power-ups and the amazing fucking soundtrack. Like, the soundtrack is always amazing, but they really stepped it up in that third entry. And the really improved visuals. Like, I can see why this was everyone's favorite game for a while and why it was, like, the pinnacle, the thing to go for, But I do feel like we've surpassed it since. At the very least, in ancillary games, right? Like I would say Hollow Knight is a better overall game than Super Metroid. I would say AM2R is a better overall game than Super Metroid. You know, um, and like the Prime games may be more linear, but I would say I had more fun with them than I did with Super Metroid. So take from that what you will. I don't know. I mean, yeah, I don't know. It kind of depends on how you look at it, I guess. So, yeah, that's Super Metroid. You know, it's good. It's good. It's been surpassed, um, and there are places where it shows its age. But overall, it's good. I like it. You know, there are some design choices I don't necessarily agree with, but I can't like throw stones at it because it's still good. You know, whatever. Um, so yeah, that's that. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next live. Laters. Okay, end card time. I'm supposed to tell you to like, comment, subscribe, you know, all that stupid YouTube shit. There's a bell thingy, whatever. I have all the social media stuff: Facebook, Twitter, Twitch, YouTube. Mostly I use Facebook and Twitter to tell you about my Twitch and YouTube uploads. I've got a Patreon, but you know, Patreon is one of those things where people who can afford to throw away money give money to people who can't. And so if you can't afford to throw away money, then you shouldn't be doing that. And if you can afford to throw away money, consider charities. There's a pandemic, there's global warming, there's millions of people in the world who don't have toilets, which is just awful. So I've linked a few charities in the description down below in case you're interested in that. And if you can't donate money to a charity, consider donating some of your time, because that's also very useful. And yeah, thanks for watching. Bye.